Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. This is a very special webinar, and I'm very proud to present the product launch of FSLogix new product called Cloud Cache technology. As you know, we are pretty close to Citrix Synergy. It's going to be next week. I'm traveling now on Friday. So if you are at Synergy, make sure to drop by the FSLogix booth to see this new product, but also get a peek inside of my automation stuff. And I'm going to be there with my carry-on lab and show you how you can build your master images and reference images at a very high speed. Normally it takes less than 3 minutes to build a master image, and you're going to see all that there, so make sure. Now, this webinar is being recorded, so we're going to send out the recording tomorrow. So if you're listening in now, have a good time. Thank you for joining in. And I'm not going to steal any more time because I know there's going to be a ton of questions at the end. So I'm just going to pass it over to Gabe.
All right, thanks, Eric. This is really great. And you're right, Synergy's next week, which is why we wanted to launch this week, because there's so much activity with Synergy. We thought it was important to have this conversation the week before. So, hey everybody, my name is Gabe Knuth. If you're not familiar with me, I spent the last 10 or 11 years blogging on brianmadden.com talking about end user environment management, end user computing. And so joining FSLogix was a big deal for me because I love this company and I love what we're doing. And when I first got to look at the roadmap, this is the first thing they showed me. And I could not be more excited to be talking about this and launching it today. Joining me, we have Kevin Goodman, our CEO, and Doug Coombs, our VP of Product Management. Both of these guys, I'm sure you've heard of at least as well, especially Kevin. So FSLogix, if you're not familiar, I'm pretty sure you are, but if you're not, our whole goal is to build products that make admins' lives easier, and in the process, hopefully save some money and increase end user productivity in the process. And we do this through a platform that has been developed to work on physical desktops, in private data centers, or in the public cloud. We think that making admins' lives easier involves operating where the admins are working at currently. And that sort of lends into what we're going to talk about today. We've got some pretty vocal, active community members. These guys are out there helping champion FSLogix, and we are very grateful to have them on board. We've actually had some community members that like FSLogix so much they joined the company, myself included, but I am third on a list that includes Jim Moyle and Benny Trish. These guys are Citrix CTPs. They'll be joining Eric at Citrix Synergy for meetings beforehand, and we're very fortunate to have them on board as well. Before we get into Cloud Cache technology, it's probably worth going through our list of products a little bit, just to make sure everybody's familiar. This list, as it stands right now, is application masking, Java control, Office 365 container, and profile container. App masking, if you're not familiar, works at the kernel level to dynamically mask applications and plugins, fonts, and things like that. And we can do this at a user or group or computer level, also processes and networking. And frankly, if that's not enough for you, we have a partnership with Device Trust that you can hide applications based on just about any single thing that you can pull out of Windows. And it's actually really cool. If you haven't heard of those guys, they're worth checking out. With this approach, we can enforce device-based licensing and make it so that users can only access applications from specific endpoints, rather than maybe what we've done in the past, where with some creative rights, denying execute rights and things like that. Those approaches don't really work when the auditing tool runs. With FSLogix, we can make your stuff, your licensing compliant. The overall goal of application masking, though, is to massively reduce the number of Windows Gold images we have. And so the goal here is we put as many applications as we can on a single base image that we can use for multiple departments, replacing what we would have had as individual images before. And then we can apply rules on top of or into our FSLogix engine that hides applications from the end users. We can go into more detail about this at another time. If you can check out FSLogix.com if you want to hear more. And of course, we'll be at Synergy and we can show demos of this in action. We can show you how easy it is to configure. There's no back end or anything like that. We think it's pretty cool. Java Control is the easiest product to describe. We let you co-locate multiple versions of Java on the same device, and we map those versions of Java to specific URLs or applications. And so if you have multiple versions of Java in your environment, you probably need this to help make sure that you're using the most appropriate version of Java for a given application or site, but defaulting to the most recent / secure version of Java for everything else. Our Office 365 container and profile container products are kind of at the core of this discussion today. Office 365 container enables true cached exchange mode with our containerization product technology. The way this works is we create a network-based VHD container, and we take the Office data out of the end user's desktop itself, and we put it into this container. This includes things like the Outlook OST file and the OneDrive cache, OneNote, Skype for Business Gal, things like that. Even Windows Search we can put into this container and keep it stored centrally, which you'll note is pretty unique because for years, we've been turning off Windows Search and running Outlook in live mode because we had to in non-persistent environments. Now we can actually put that stuff in a network location. We then mount that VHD using native Windows VHD mount capabilities to the base image, and then FSLogix actually makes that VHD appear to be in the exact location that the user's applications in Windows think that it is. But Kevin, what's the difference between just attaching a VHD and what we're doing with the containers?
Yeah, Gabe. So if you didn't look at the insides of what FSLogix is doing with its file system filter driver, you might think they're the exact same thing. The truth is, though, that a container has a lot more fault tolerance and other items built around it. One of those enables OneDrive. OneDrive doesn't like being stored on a network and doesn't like a symlink. So if you look and see what a symlink, if you were to go into Explorer and look at like your documents and those things that are redirected, if they're redirected over the network, then OneDrive won't work correctly. So we do a lot of work to make that container think it is local, and we do some fault tolerance on there. But I think you're about to tell us how we're even improving upon that, Gabe.
Yeah, that's coming. Don't. I still have a profile container to go through, but yeah, we'll be talking about that in a little bit. The other product that we have that's container based here is profile containers, which similar to our Office 365 container, except this time it's profile related components. We encapsulate the entire user profile in a network based VHD. And then again, we attach that using native Windows VHD attached capabilities and show that to the user and Windows as if it is in C:\users\username. This approach, we don't copy the profile down to the endpoint. We're not a roaming profile solution that has VHD containers wrapped around it or anything. We're attaching that VHD and we're operating out of that VHD with and so we're giving our users real-time access to the profiles without having to copy stuff around. This means that no matter how big that profile is, with a roaming profile, when you log in, you have to wait for that profile to copy down, and when you log out, you have to wait for it to copy back away. With profile container, when the user logs in, that VHD is attached and you're off and running without having to wait. And so we don't eliminate, we drastically reduce profile load times. This also means that we're not hitting the file servers as hard by having to copy data around all the time. We're accessing the data as the user requests it. And that's all. And because we're not having to write the profile back to a storage location when the user logs off, we don't ever really keep a profile in an inconsistent state, which means that we virtually eliminate profile corruption. We've got different profile in Office 365 containers, even though they're pretty much the same. Even the builds are identical. I just changed the colors in the PowerPoint. Kevin, you've been around at FSLogix since the beginning. I've been here since February. Why is that?
Two reasons, Gabe. So for one, let's take a look at the Office 365 container and look at your typical environment out there in end user computing. Everybody out there may have a existing profile solution. Good example of that is Citrix UPM. They have some other competition out there as well. And the customers came to us and said, wow, it just took me a long time to get UPM installed. And the only thing wrong with it right here is that I can't use Office 365. Don't make me go back to my boss and say, I want to rip and replace all of that. Just solve my Office 365 problems. That's what the container is for. If you own somebody else's solution and you can't extricate yourself quite easily yet, you can use our Office 365 container on top of that solution. Now, if you're in a situation where you can migrate and you want to eliminate things like folder redirection, then you're going to want to use our profile container. Even when you do use our profile container, though, we also have an Office 365 container layer in on top of that. And part of the reason for that is with the Office 365 container, the source of truth is Office 365 up in the cloud. So no reason to bloat your profile with OSTs or other items that you might, if you needed to restore, you would just go to the source of truth, which is Office 365. So you can save some money if you want to by not bloating your profile with that.
All right, well said. So that's the two of our products. And so before we get into what Cloud Cache technology is all about, I wanted to look at a few different trends and go over some customer feedback we've had over the last couple of years. Most notably, cloud desktop interest has never been higher. Cloud adoption is increasing, and our customers have asked for some options with regards to this stuff. First up, cloud desktop interest. If you looked at VDI Like a Pro's 2017 survey, you'd see that 76% of the respondents to that showed interest in desktops as a service. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not saying that they're all moving to desktops as a service. They're just interested in it. That number is up 23%. From 2015, where only 53% of the people were interested in it. Interestingly, that was 1 year after we wrote a book about DAS, and so I think that we should have waited a few years to print that. Back in 2015, when the second to most recent VDI Like a Pro survey was done, a lot of the vendors, major vendors that we're talking to, had only started talking about doing stuff in the cloud. Maybe we're starting to get some concrete plans, but nowadays we've got major vendors building actual platforms, selling access to real desktops from the cloud, which includes Amazon, Citrix, Microsoft, and VMware. Plus, there's these newer providers out there that are making an impact, like Frame and WorkSpot and dozens more. So while maybe this isn't the year everybody's moving to cloud desktops, it's certainly more interesting to people, and we'll get into a little bit. There's some challenges still with doing that we think we can help alleviate, maybe accelerate this a little bit. Overall, cloud adoption is increasing. 96% of enterprises use the cloud. I think the most interesting stat in this list right here is that 81% of enterprises have a multi-cloud strategy. This could mean I'm using Salesforce and Dropbox, but it also can mean I'm having resources in AWS and Azure and Google Cloud Platform. And as you can see, the next stat there is 51% of enterprises are adopting a hybrid model with public and private cloud. So we're doing a lot with cloud, wherever that cloud might be these days. And as you can see, it's a top priority for a lot of organizations. But there's bad stuff that goes along with this. 35% of the money spent on cloud is wasted on unused resources. This is kind of the cloud equivalent of VM sprawl, I think. It's such a big deal, though, that the majority of companies out there cite optimizing costs as the #1 priority. And as it pertains to us, storage can amount to 25% of an overall cloud bill, which we think that there's room for improvement there. To give you an example of how expensive cloud costs can be, If we looked at Azure Page Blobs specifically, and it's the cheap tier for Azure Page Blobs, it's the locally redundant storage zone, capacity is 4.5 cents per gigabyte, which, you know, doesn't seem like it's a break the bank kind of situation. But Page Blobs, with Page Blobs, you also get charged for activity. And so you're paying another cent and a half for 10,000 writes. But each write over 64K is another fraction of a penny, up to a megabyte. And reads have costs as well. Even though they're 10% of the cost of writes, there's still a cost associated with reads. And so you look at that and you think, wow, okay, that might be a little bit of money, but how bad could it possibly be? If you opened up Outlook right now and sent one email, I did this the other day to get this data. I opened up Outlook, I typed 3 lines of text in an email and sent it. And that generated 1,900 writes and 3 megabytes of data, as well as 2,700 reads, and for some reason, almost 14 megabytes of data. I don't understand that one. Similarly, I went to OneDrive and I started it up, and I waited for it to copy to synchronize everything down. So this isn't artificially inflated. I started OneDrive, I copied in a 4 megabyte folder, which resulted in 18,000 writes and 53 megabytes written, and another 9,400 reads and 8 megabytes, just for a 4 meg folder. And so I think I'm preaching to the choir here. Desktop storage interaction is different than any other application. So when we're looking at cloud storage, this I think is how we get to the point where cloud storage is 25% of an overall cloud bill. And like I said, we think we can do something about that. The last thing here is some customer feedback. You guys want options. We've heard that customers want redundant, highly available user and profile data. They want technical solutions to storage challenges while moving to the cloud. Back in 2014, when Brian Madden and I wrote the DAS book, there were a lot of mental challenges, and those appear to have gone by the wayside now based on all those cloud adoption stats that I just showed. But the technical challenges still remain, and so we need to come up with solutions for those. We need portability in between platforms, being able to move in and amongst clouds and on-prem, as well as easier disaster recovery and backups, and reduced cloud storage costs. This is why we're talking about Cloud Cache today. Cloud Cache isn't a product, though. It's not. We're not adding it to our lineup of products as something completely separate. What Cloud Cache is it builds upon what we've already got for Office 365 container and Profile container. Cloud Cache is going to allow you to store Profile and Office data on premises or in the cloud, using protocols that are native to whatever storage you're using. So in the case of local file shares, we're going to use SMB. If we're going to use Azure Page Blobs, we have a separate connector just for that, so that we can make sure that we're using native protocols that are optimized for that system. And since working in all different desktop platforms is important to us, we're also going to we're making this work with physical VDI, RDSH, and DAS. We're enabling Cloud Cache by creating a cache that prevents unnecessary network and storage utilization. In certain situations, you can keep this cache local. And by keeping it local, that means that we don't have to go, if we're keeping our data in the cloud, we don't have to go to the cloud every time we want to read something. We can read it one time, keep it nearby. It doesn't necessarily have to be local to that or on that desktop to begin with, but we're keeping it nearby. And that way, anytime we want to go read that data, we're pulling it from some nearby location rather than hitting the cloud and incurring more read costs. And for writes, we're doing the same thing. We can optimize those writes and put them back to the cloud. This stuff also works for on-premises, though. We're saving file server resources with this local cache as well. With the cache, that also means that the applications are more resistant during an outage. So if there is a storage outage, and we'll get into this in a little bit, if there is an interruption in our connectivity to the storage, the applications themselves don't lose a connection to the data because they're operating out of stuff that's in that cache. If they make any writes, those writes are synchronized back when the storage reconnects. And it sounds like it might be a lot going on, but we're just configuring this with some registry keys, just like we configure everything else with FSLogix. It's a registry key that specifies a storage location, and there's no other management infrastructure or anything like that to deploy. So let's look at some of the benefits of what this thing can bring for us. It can bring storage continuity, which I touched on a little bit. We can get into that a little bit more in a second. It's going to help reduce cloud storage costs, reduce file server load as well, and we can derive some more value from our existing hardware. If we look at the storage continuity use case here, this is the primary reason behind Cloud Cache development. Our customers told us about issues they were having with storage and network blips disrupting applications. And the example that they gave us was, or that came up most often amongst our customers, was OneDrive. When connected through through a typical storage system where there's a storage controller connected to two different arrays, even when that storage controller had to fail over to the other array, that was enough of a blip to make OneDrive crash. Or to become non-responsive. Maybe it doesn't crash, but there's no way to show unresponsive in a PowerPoint slide. When this happens, that forces the users to have to log off and back on again. So not only did they maybe lose data that they had, not only did their applications maybe stop responding, but they also lost productivity by having to log off and back on. What we can do with Cloud Cache is with that cache that we're now keeping, we can automatically buffer that activity, that user activity during an outage. And the cache itself keeps those applications running. And in this situation, OneDrive won't crash anymore. And we have a demo at the end that we can show some of this kind of functionality. If we pull back up our cloud storage can be expensive slide before, we're not going to go ahead and rehash this again, but I want to show where Cloud Cache can help with this. We've got all those writes that the Outlook and OneDrive's scenarios created, as well as all those reads. Cloud Cache can help with this by optimizing those writes for whichever platform we're talking to. So if we're talking to the cloud, we can, this top section here, talking about the Azure page flops pricing, this is our algorithm. We can use this to form proper storage parcels that when we transfer them up, we can make the most out of the transactions that we're getting charged for. Likewise, we can cache those reads, so we're not incurring the cost of hitting the cloud for the read every time. At Microsoft Ignite last year, we heard that Azure storage, only a third of Azure storage pricing is based on capacity. The other 2/3 is based on operations, like puts, gets, reads, all of that. And so with Cloud Cache, we can absorb those operations and reduce the cost of cloud storage. That cache also helps us out with on-premises storage costs. In the local data center, that cache that we keep now means reduced IOPS on your file server, reduced load on your file servers, which means you can either buy fewer resources or keep the resources you have and have an excellent user experience. And the other thing that we've seen here is that we can virtually expand your local storage. And let me set this scenario up. Right now, everybody probably does the same process for buying new desktop computers. If you're buying desktops, you're calling up whoever your desktop provider is of choice, you're ordering a pallet full of their second cheapest units, and these units probably have 500 gig hard drives in them. If you have SSDs in them, it's even less space, which is fine in a traditional sense, but as you move to Office 365, now you're taking advantage of OneDrive, and now you get 1 terabyte of space on OneDrive. How's that going to work if we're trying to keep all of our data local? Cloud Cache gives our users full functionality without having to buy new hardware, but there's something here, Kevin. I'm going to ask you to explain this. What does this mean as it relates to cloud files from OneDrive? Because it sounds like they have this solved, but how do we factor into that?
Okay, so cloud files is the concept of a just-in-time file system. So the idea is on your desktop, your physical machine, you'll see the OneDrive folder, you'll see the icons and the properties of it, but until you click on that file, it won't actually download. So it's that concept of 1 terabyte of data into a 500 gig SAC. The problem with that is It's almost like using it in the web apps. It's great if you, but it doesn't improve your user experience. People that we know of, especially ones that are, our engineering customers or architect customers, the ones that are working on files that are, gigabytes in size, they don't want to wait for that to download. The other item about that is, if you were, if you just did a PC refresh, it's 500 gig. But we have customers with 280 gig hard drives, or just now using, they want to use FSLogix for their profile system, and with this they can do that because with Cloud Cache we can extend the life of that machine. But also they only want to extend the life long enough to get to their virtual desktop. We see Cloud Cache as enabling the Citrixes, the VMwares, the Amazons, and especially Microsoft Azure desktops as an easy way to get to those desktops. And to do that, I think you have a slide about this, but it is going to enable you to be one profile solution across all platforms. And then I think you're going to go into it, right, about how you can move easily between the two?
Yeah, exactly. Yep, we'll get to that in a bit. So these benefits that we have, we think are pretty valuable to customers. And I've lost focus on my window. There we go. So we think these are pretty valuable to our customers. We're creating a local or a nearby cache. We've added cloud connectivity, and these two additions enable storage continuity, optimize cloud storage costs, and local storage costs, and we can derive some more value from our existing hardware. These are important to us, they're important to our customers, and we've decided to just include these with Profile Container and Office 365 Container. But that's not all Cloud Cache is. In fact, Cloud Cache isn't just a single storage location. With Cloud Cache, you can use any storage location simultaneously in any combination, and it will automatically keep all of the locations in sync. And the high-level technical description of how this works is Cloud Cache lives on the desktop, and it writes all changes to all locations. But we pick a primary location, and that's the location that we read from. And we can support with this all sorts of different platforms. We can support Azure, we can support local SMB, we can support disaster recovery sites, we can add support for other cloud providers like AWS or Google Cloud, things like that. We think Cloud Cache offers the ultimate flexibility in terms of where we're putting our user profile and Office data. And this approach that we've got here enables more benefits, like enhanced storage continuity, which is like storage continuity but better. It also enables VHD container backups, offline access, profile moves, globally redundant DR, and actually a few different DAS scenarios. So let's jump into that real quick. In terms of enhanced storage continuity, we're no longer dependent on the storage system itself for failover. You notice this slide looks similar to the one that I showed before, but there's no storage controller in it anymore. We just have lines going to each one of the different storage locations because now Cloud Cache is the thing that's maintaining that. So we can configure multiple storage locations, and they can be on premises or in the cloud, and Cloud Cache works with that. Storage interruptions then cause an instant failover to one of the other storage locations. And keep in mind here, this isn't failover in the classic, like there's a controller that's switching from A to B somewhere else. Cloud Cache just says, oh, I can't read from this location anymore. I'm going to start reading from this location. And any changes that are created are stored in that local cache. And then when the original location comes back online, it resyncs that data with that location. And then once it's up to date again, it starts using that as its primary location to read from. We're also offering the ability to back up container VHDs, or we think that backing up container VHDs is a good use case for this. Currently, when we're using VHD containers, when the user's logged in, those VHDs are open and locked, and so they can't be backed up in a consistent state. Cloud Cache now lets you store VHDs in 2 or more locations in case something goes wrong with the first. This factors into some more stuff in a little bit. We also think that it enables offline access. Laptop users can operate out of the local cache, and so they can take their laptop offline, take it onto the plane or train, and they'll have truly offline access to all of their data. And when they reconnect, everything is resynchronized. Another use case that we heard about it when we were talking to some customers about this is profile storage location moves. Currently, if you want to move the file server that you are storing all of your user profiles, that can be a challenging project that takes a weekend instead of overnight or on the fly in real time. With Cloud Cache, all we need to do is configure a new location in the registry, and all of that profile data is automatically replicated to the new location. And when that sync is complete, we can just shut down the old one. So we can do this live in real time, no downtime for the users or no late nights on the weekends for admins. Another benefit is globally redundant disaster recovery. And this sort of builds on the VHD backup philosophy that we can put all this data in multiple locations. With Cloud Cache, we can put this data in disaster recovery sites wherever they may be. That could be across different clouds. Maybe we want to put stuff in Azure and AWS to make sure that we've got data completely unrestrained by whatever cloud it happens to be in. We can keep it in other public clouds, private clouds, on premises, at a hot site, you name it, we can put data there. We simply add additional storage locations and then the data is replicated. And I mentioned hot sites already. But if you have desktops at your hot site, those users, when they end up having to use those in the event of a disaster, that data is there waiting for them already. The last thing here isn't exactly disaster recovery dependent, but it gives us the ability to switch what primary location we use to follow the cheapest storage options. So while we might be writing to all the different locations, we can switch to the location that is has the cheapest read charges for read activities. The last main benefit here that we see for Cloud Cache is these different DAS scenarios. The first one is DAS migrations, and I already mentioned in 2014 that Brian and I wrote a book about DAS. Of the technical challenges, migrating from on-premises desktops to DAS desktops was number one. The challenge is, how do I get my user data from on-prem to the cloud? And then how do I manage that? Because odds are I'm not moving to the cloud all at once. And so I probably have some users on-prem and some in the cloud, which means I need to enable or manage two different user environment file storage locations. With Cloud Cache, it was enough. How do you do that? Do you set up a VPN and use DFS to replicate data back and forth? Do we just copy all the data? Do we have the cloud users go across the internet to get back to the on-premises storage and have that bad user experience? Or do we put the data in the cloud and have the on-prem users have the bad experience? This is the kind of thing that paralyzes a DAS project. With Cloud Cache, we can simply install Cloud Cache and configure two different storage locations in our desktops that are on premises, and then that data is waiting for them in the cloud when they move to the cloud. And likewise, it works with a hybrid DAS scenario where maybe users are using on-premises desktops during the day, but when they remote into work at nighttime, they're going to a DAS desktop. With Cloud Cache, that data can be in both locations live in real time for those users. And the other thing that is a bit of a soapbox issue for me is DAS backups. A lot of people, when they move to DAS, they rely on the cloud provider to make sure that that data is available. And that's fine. The providers are very good at that. But what happens if there's some sort of issue with a data center? I've told this story before, but we used to co-locate web servers at a colo facility, and I thought I did everything right. I bought two different power drops on two different circuits, but what I didn't know was that both of those circuits went back to a single PDU. And so when that PDU went down, both my circuits were dead, and our website was down for a long time. If that was desktops, that would be devastating. And so with Cloud Cache, you can configure a local, in this case, it would be a cloud location for your DAS desktops, and something that lives in your data center. And that way, that data is always replicated locally. You possess that data should you need it from a backup perspective. So those are the benefits that we see for Cloud Cache. We we're very excited about this. We've got two different options that we're planning at this point. The product isn't GA yet, so all this stuff is subject to change. This is my disclaimer, like everything you've heard might be a lie. This is how we see this going down. First off, we've got the built-in stuff that we've talked about. The local cache with cloud connectivity that enables the storage continuity and so on, that's going to be built into Office 365 and Profile Container. And then all the other stuff that we've just been talking about most recently, the multiple storage locations, the simultaneous use that enables all these other use cases, this is going to be an add-on module for Profile Container and Office 365 Container. Today, we're launching a tech preview of this. You can visit FSLogix.com to learn more and sign up for that. Azure will be our first cloud supported, followed by others based on customer feedback. So as you get your hands on this, if you decide that you really want SFTP, you better let us know, because there's other customers that are going to be asking for AWS or Google Cloud or whatever. So we're going to prioritize these based on customer feedback. And like I mentioned before, the final details on the pricing and packaging are going to be determined at GA. One more thing before we get to the demo is we will be at Citrix Synergy. We'll be showing this stuff off. We're in booth 506, so we'll have demos. We'll have customers hanging out, talking about how they use FSLogix's products. We've got partners coming by that are, from all around the world that are doing implementations and working with their own customers. We've got typical conference swag like USB bottle openers, so that's useful in two different ways. Eric is going to be there. He already mentioned he's bringing his new toys with him, and we've got some time set up with him to come by and hang out at the booth and do his setup from there. He's very anxious to get his hands on this stuff and play with it for the first time at the show. And we'll also have a daily giveaway, which is a Samsung Gear S3 smartwatch. So we're giving one of those away on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. With that said, now, Doug, if you're around, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you talk through this demo. And I'll caveat this is a video demo. We were not brave enough to do a live demo in this webinar. We will be giving this exact same demo, though, at Synergy, and you can see it live.
Thanks, Gabe. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you, and I have clicked play.
Excellent. So when Gabe says we're not brave enough, what he really means is that he was afraid I'd go rogue with a 45-minute demo. So he created a recording that limited me in time. So what we're showing here on the screen right now is that I am reconfiguring a traditional, for those of you who are familiar with FSLogix, the registry there was configured for our traditional profile redirection. And what I'm doing here is just changing that over to our cloud cache location. So the CCD key is what we utilize in order to specify the paths for those remote profiles, and I was just reconfiguring that there. Sorry, I'm stammering a bit. The demo originally included a example of what would happen with traditional kind of roaming profiles or remote profiles when a network connection went down. As we were going over this with Kevin, he correctly pointed out that everyone on this call is going to be intimately familiar with the terrible user experience that occurs when there's a storage connection failure with a non-persistent VDI environment, as an example. So as this comes up, what we're doing is essentially booting into a machine that's configured for Cloud Cache. This machine is essentially a brand new profile. There's nothing on this machine, and I wanted to make this a fairly real-life demo. And so I thought, what do real users do? And in my experience, real users spend their time either looking at fuzzy kitten videos or fixing their wallpaper. So I decided to go with the wallpaper option. What I'm doing here is I am grabbing some wallpapers, and in order to just kind of simulate putting some information into the profile container, I'm just going to copy these onto the desktop. And so that's moving to our remote profile container, as well as in this case, because we're running Cloud Cache, this is also going into the cached environment. So I'll move these over, and as a user would do here, I'm going to go ahead and I've got the ones I'm interested in. I will go ahead and arrange these, close Edge, and then I'm going to want to take a closer look at them in order to decide exactly which one that I want. This is the first thing that's interesting for Cloud Cache is, as we look at these, this is not creating read activity on the remote profile drive. This is all coming out of cache. So as Gabe talked about, the many reads and the data crossing or occurring in those transactions is not occurring here because it's local. Now I've looked at all of those. I've decided that the one I probably like is that picture of the road. So I'm going to take a look at it again, but what I don't know is that I'm going to end up here with a network disconnection. And so I'm going to simulate that by just coming in here and turning off the network connection for my virtual machine. So we'll go ahead and apply that. And then when I come back to that virtual machine, you'll notice the little network indicator in the bottom right that I do not have any network connections. So what would happen in the traditional environment here is I would end up with a user experience that would be definitely suboptimal, which is when they try to open a file, they're going to end up not being able to open that file. And depending on, this is a relatively simple example, but in other scenarios, I may end up with a bad profile after this or other environmental problems. So here, you'll notice because I have Cloud Cache enabled, even though I have no access to that remote profile, I'm able to go ahead and open each of these with no problem. And so that's, again, one advantage, user experience when they're trying to reading from the local profile, or I'm sorry, from the local cache. But what happens if I want to write to that profile container? So I'm going to go ahead and, again, to simulate that, just as a simple example, I'm going to go ahead and copy a couple of these. And these are going to be copied, again, into the cache because I have no network connectivity. But once that cache is updated, I'm going to go ahead and come out here now, and I'm going to turn back on the network. And so it's going to reestablish that connection. And the question then is, well, what does my user experience? And the answer is nothing. The user probably never even realized that they lost access to their profile. At this very moment, Cloud Cache is updating the remote profile container. And as Gabe mentioned, this was not going to just one little profile container, but two profile containers. So both of these profile containers have now been updated. And if I were to lose connectivity to just container 1 or container 2, and the user were to log off and log back on, next time when we come back up, Cloud Cache is going to recognize that one of those containers was not correctly synchronized. And again, this is in the context of a non-persistent environment. Cloud Cache would recognize that one of those was out of sync, and it would sync it back up so that I have two good profile containers. As Gabe mentioned, we're going to be at Synergy. I will have the software on my laptop, as will others, and we'd absolutely love to show this to you live and in person. So that, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions, but for now, Gabe, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you after that simple demonstration, and we'll get on to the questions.
Yeah, what's interesting, Doug, thanks for doing that, is that you showed the worst case scenario there with your network getting disconnected. So we weren't connected to either storage location, and it still worked. And so we could have shown disconnecting from one storage location. That still would have been a cool demo. But in this case, yeah, we lost all connectivity, and everything still was functioning just fine.
Absolutely, and with no interruption to the user. The user had no idea there was a problem.
Yeah, this is great. Okay, so that kind of concludes our presentation here. But we've got quite a bit of time left for questions, and so if we have any, I'll have to figure out where I'm going here with GoToWebinar. Eric, can you pull that up? I lost my.
Yeah. So let me see. I have a couple of questions here, but let me just make you. I think you need to be unorganized to see it. But let's start with the Cloud Cache questions here. So it's going to be included in suite. So you talked about that. So we have a question here from. Do you see it?
Yeah, I see it there. Go ahead, though. I'll let you. You're in there.
Okay, so we're gonna jump down here to the cloud cache related questions. So we have actually two here from Rob Beckmans, who recently joined Citrix. Congratulations on that, Rob. So the writes are not happen in cache layer; they are optimized only. And are the writes handled in the cache layer? Do you see that question from Rob?
I don't. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, thank you. No. Still working on it. Go ahead, just read that again and we'll answer it. I was trying to find it there, but I don't see it.
So are the writes handled in the cache layer?
Are the writes handled in the cache layer? The writes are written to the cache, and then the cache is what is doling those writes out to all the storage locations. Does that make sense?
I think so. I think so. And if not, I'm sure Rob will jump.
I'm sure he will. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot of people. So from Matthew here. So when is the GA forecast? So I know it's not GL yet, but is there anything you can say about the dates? Because people are pretty crazy about trying this out.
I'll tell you what. I tried like heck to get Kevin to commit to a date, but he wouldn't do it.
All right, so I will explain to you here. We want this out as soon as possible, but the sign up for the beta, you know how it is. We can't test every single storage. So it's going to go out when the customers say it's ready. It's to go out when the beta testers say it's going to go out. But I told my board of directors we're going to start making money on this thing and selling it in Q2. So that gives you a hint.
And to be clear, it is going out into the hands of beta testers right now, and those beta testers they're big deals, right? They're big companies.
So you know what? Yeah, our largest customers have been waiting for this for a while, and so they already have it in their hands. And now we're opening it up to everyone who's on this webinar and who hears about it can now get their hands on it in the public preview.
Excellent, Kevin. Excellent. So we have a question here from Ian Johns. So is this Windows only?
Windows as the desktop OS, yes. So it won't work on Mac or Linux.
Good. I want to ask about there's anything on the future about other ones, but let's jump to the next one from Roger. So where does the cache live? So
it is configurable. It's configurable. It could be local, and or it could be in your private data center. I think the preview that we have right now, it's local, but then it could reside anywhere.
Correct. That's correct, Kevin.
Excellent. So we have another question here from Brett. With Cloud Moves, will there be an application server that copies the data rather than relying on agents on EUC machines or VDA hosts?
That is a great idea that we will take back to engineering.
Excellent. We have another one here from Terry. So is the multiple writes being actioned from the client? Is this a file or block level? Is this on a last write who wins? Can the location be prioritized through Active Directory, Active Passive, or live DR?
A lot of questions there.
I'll take them. I will take them. So in the patent, we actually call it a split stream driver, and we're using algorithms in there that we're trying to patent. We've applied for a patent on there for the most efficient method. And I think that was the first question. Eric, can you do the other questions again?
Yeah, so the second one here is, this is at a file or block level?
Block level.
Okay, so who wins? Is it last write who wins, or?
So what will happen in there is an efficient algorithm. If you're writing the exact same block, then there's no reason to write it out twice. But if you update that block, then that block is updated with change data. So
okay, and
I have to go into that a little more. Typically, when people think about multiple access to a profile, they're thinking on file level differences, right? So I open up in a session here and I open up a Word document, and I open up a session over there and I open up in a Word document, and which one of those updates presides in there. In this location, we're talking about one user in a session updating multiple locations of that storage. So technically it's last writer wins, but it's not kind of like how you would think of it if you were doing a file-based profile solution.
Excellent. And I think the last part here is, if you have multiple cloud storages, is it possible to prioritize it? So which goes first?
Yeah, Doug, that's correct, right? And that would be part of how you configured it in the with the GPOs, right?
That is absolutely correct. The configuration utilizing GPOs will specify which is the primary for read, and then Kevin, as you mentioned, there's some other things we're thinking about there, but that is initially true that you would configure that.
Excellent. So we have another one here from Matthew. What are the outbound network requirements for the client agent?
It's a good question. So let's back up just a touch. So we can save to any number of storage locations, but there's no theoretical limit to that, but there is a practical limit to how many storage locations that we can talk to, and I think your mileage is going to vary based upon where those storage locations are. If you're all local, you can probably get away with more locations than if you were the cloud, and there is going to be an impact on internet bandwidth and things like that, but it really depends on user activity, how many clouds you're saving, how many external locations you're saving the data to, and so on. I don't know if we have any more detail to share with that or not, guys. Do we?
No, I think
your mileage may vary is a good way to.
Okay.
But as we get more feedback from our pre-beta sites and stuff like that, we'll be able to go into that more details.
Great. So we have another one here.
Network requirements. Okay, so when we'll talk to Azure File Storage using its native REST APIs. So in that scenario we were talking about using a physical desktop to go out to Azure, we use the native REST APIs, so you won't have to set up an SMB server or try to use SMB in that scenario. I know personally, here at our ISP blocks that port, what is it, 445, Gabe, automatically blocks it at the ISP to try to stop,
So WannaCry?
Yeah, so this will not be vulnerable to that because we'll be talking directly to the REST APIs.
And that's important to note too, and we should have brought it up before, but currently we can store profile containers in cloud-based services, but the process to do that is complicated and expensive. We need to set up SMB gateways, we need to set up storage connectors, and then gateways to connect SMB to those storage connectors, and those all consume cloud resources in terms of compute, and so it's expensive to do. By talking directly to the storage with their native protocols through their native APIs, we save the cost of those cloud resources, and we get the job done a lot more efficiently.
Good. So we have another question here from Jim. It's a two-part. So first, how is index handling, and related to indexing, how seamless is the file searching via desktop and mobile devices? So I think is the Outlook sync. How will that work in terms of cloud and caching?
So in this situation, since this is an extension of Office 365 container, it's all going to work just as it does now. When we need to pull down the search index, the search index is in the remote container, and as we need it, it will be pulled down locally or to that cache that'll be nearby, and then we operate out of that. And so as FSLogix does their inclusion of the search database, it will do that as it would normally do it. It just happens to be pulling its data maybe from a different location than it was with previous versions.
Cool. So
Gabe, sorry, this is Doug. I wanted to go back to that previous question on storage because when you talk about storage requirements, one of the interesting things we found is that profiles, because they're time sensitive, the storage impacts actual performance. We're able to kind of insulate the user experience from that a bit with Cloud Cache, because the write and read occurs from the cache and then can trickle to some of those slower storage, remote storage locations. So I just wanted to mention that because that is actually one of the primary things that we've had interest in.
Yeah, good point.
Great, and we have a very good question here. So if users have a local cache on a CNAP server, will that also mean that you need to be able to hold all the online users' OST files on the local disk?
This is a good question. This is one of the things that we're working through right now as we march towards GA. That cache is going to be configurable, and so we're what we're going to end up having, I think, is going to be the best practice is going to be to make that cache a small enough size that we don't impact either the XenApp server itself or PVS write cache if we're using PVS. Small enough that we can still get the benefits of having the cache from maintaining continuity during storage failovers and things like that, but we may not be able to have everything local all the time like we can with individual desktops. So hopefully that answers that question. I don't know if, Doug, you have anything else to add to that right now, but.
No, I think that's exactly correct. The mechanism to allow that cache to be configurable is what we'll depend on in order to make sure that people are able to put the cache at a point that makes sense or in a place that makes sense.
I think we lost Gabe.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay, cool, could be me. Is the cache per user per server?
Good question.
Per VHD. Because it's a block level cache, so it's per VHD. So on Zen Desktop, that would be like per user. On Zen App, that would be for each user. Internally, that's how we're maintaining it. May look to anyone who's inspecting it as one big cache, but internally, we're maintaining those blocks per VHD.
Thanks, Kevin. And related to that, is the cache deduplicated?
Yeah, there's some there's some part of that split stream is to stop redundant writes, but I'm not sure what you mean by deduplicated. So if you and I both have an email and an OST file and we have separate Cloud Cache VHDs, I do not think those are deduplicated, not in this version.
Excellent. So we have another one here from Jared. Is there a specific timeout on the connection to the storage locations?
No.
Good. How much space is needed?
Yeah. So to further on into that, rather than just saying flat out no, imagine if every read you came from the cache, then you might not even notice that the network has gone down. The second you go to write and you can't, that's when it's going to do its fault tolerance and its high availability. Or
I think it's related to.
Yeah, first time it reads and it can't get it, it can't find it in the cache and it has to go out to the network to get it and it doesn't succeed. That's where it will fail over as well.
Cool. So we have another one here from Frank. How much space is needed for the cache?
Depend on the exact environment. I mean, this is going to be another, your mileage will vary. If you're doing it for local failover, it would be different from a non-persistent VDI. For a non-persistent VDI, it'd be whatever has been cached in that session.
Good.
Up to the amount of storage available.
Correct, right? or up to a maximum specified size.
Correct. Yeah. Okay.
So we have a good question here from Aaron. So if the profile should get corrupted, is there an easy way to clean out all the locations, or do we need to go to each and every one of them and could we have permission issues?
So One of the things we've noticed with our existing products is the level of corruption is reduced significantly. Corruption happens for a variety of reasons in your roaming profile or folder redirection or one of those type of other solutions. We reduce those significantly even in our first version. So I'm not exactly sure what he means by corrupted, but the other thing we allow, and it's in the existing product, is the volume shadow service. So users can go and do self-help and self-remediate and go back and get any of the files that they want. And so if you went into and you had the volume shadow service turned on and you right clicked and said get a previous version of this file, we can do that, and guess what? It would replicate to all the instances of the cache.
Good, and we have a great point here from Ekonda that if you lose your network connectivity, you have a bigger problem than just the cloud sync, right? So.
Exactly.
So all right, that was a heavy-handed way of showing it in the demo, but what we have found, and maybe you don't notice this, I like to refer to Aaron Parker and Helge and Sean Bass talking about I have 99 problems in folder redirection is every one of them. One of the things that you don't notice with folder redirection is you blipped your network and you weren't trying to get to any of those files, you don't notice it. If you're storing your entire, now there are 99 bad things about folder redirection, and FSLogix profile solves every one of those, but one of the things that if you have your profile out on the network inside a container and it blips in our existing version in 2.8, we'll reconnect if that happens, if that blip comes back within seconds. This is for I dropped a SAN. My network's still up, but I dropped a SAN, and now what do I do? And in the past, you would have lost all your folder redirection connectivity. Let's say you'll not be able to get to any of those things. In this one, you'll continue working. So, if I drop my network connection from my remote location, I'm not getting my Citrix desktop either. That's not what it's meant. Between the Citrix desktop and its storage is what we keep alive.
Excellent. And for those who doesn't follow the news, Microsoft have now, in the latest release now in 18.03, disabled the possibility to do app data roaming. So that's a great win for FSLogix.
We may have some other things to announce regarding our relationship with Microsoft at Synergy. We love those guys, and they just make it so easy to these days. The Microsoft of today makes it so easy for third parties like us to communicate with them. As a matter of fact, we have a co-sell relationship with Microsoft. And Microsoft, like Citrix, recognizes that companies like FSLogix enable them to sell more product, and that's what they want to do. We say we reduce friction. Gartner tells us that half the people in the world people would work remotely if they were able to, and that means if Citrix has 100 million users now, and Microsoft Windows is 1 billion users, that means there's another 400 million users out there that maybe Cloud Cache can help the Citrixes and the Microsofts and the VMwares and Amazons of the world start hosting. And so, stay tuned for more information at Synergy, but that's our goal, is to make all of them more successful.
Yeah, we could discuss this for a couple of hours, and my opinion of this is if you want the perfect user experience, you cannot live without FSLogix. Enough said.
Well, thank you. Very nice.
So we have just to put in here, we have a question here from Bronson. He's really active on Twitter, and I know he's working in a really big environment. So he's asking if there's any known issues with AppV cache and Windows Server 2016.
I see that question as it relates to profile containers. I don't know of any.
We work with AppV just fine.
Yeah, I haven't seen any issues, but Bronson, if you have issues, just send them an email or send it. Yeah, we'll pass it on for you. Are you going to be at Inspire as well?
You betcha.
So Microsoft.
Yeah, we will be at Inspire.
So we have another question here from Tim. How would be the experience if the VDI session lost its network rather than cache to cloud breakage? So I think we covered that. So if your network connection goes down, you lose your session. If you have an RDS session or a Citrix session or VMware session, doesn't matter, it goes down. So.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have a question from Martin. Will this be available without plugin for on-prem file server solutions?
Available without, repeat that, please.
Without plugin for on-prem file server solutions. So I guess he's talking about the Cloud Cache and.
Yeah, yes. If you were in your private data center and you are using SAN storage now, any of the storages, like if you're a Nutanix customer, this works with the Nutanix and all of those storage facilities that are out there on-prem. You don't have to back up to the cloud. It's just available if you want it.
Excellent. So we have a question here from Johan. Will the Azure pod go to the blob and Azure files?
Doug, that's probably a you question, but it's all of our conversations thus far have been around page blobs.
So the answer. Sorry, could you repeat the question? I cut out there just right at the end of it.
Yeah. So will the Azure pod go to the blob and Azure files?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So initially we're planning on page blob. But as you know, Kevin and Gabe both mentioned, the plan is that we're going to go wherever our customers are going, and that's one of the really interesting things about our architecture is we're not limited to you know, the external environment the same way as you are if you don't have code at this layer. So wherever our customers go is where we'll go with that, and we have the abstraction layer to allow us to do that.
Excellent. So we have another question here from Frank. This is related to the profile container in general. So let's say you have a 20 gig disk and you clean it up, you delete 10 gigs of files. So does it shrink itself? Like, you know, if you have a thin provision disk and you fill it up and you delete the allocation of the size is going to be the same.
Yeah, and so that is true in our existing product, and we have best practices and utilities that can go in and shrink the size of those containers for you. We have that now. So yeah, for everyone else that doesn't know exactly what the question is, one of the things you do notice about a VHD is you can make it a fixed size, but you can also make it dynamic. If you make it dynamic, it starts out small and then grows. But like any other file system that you know, has inefficiencies in it, if you drop an ISO on your desktop and it's 2 gig and then you delete that ISO, it's amazing. It expanded to get to grow to accommodate the 2 gig, but then when you delete it, it doesn't shrink. And we have best practices for you. Our customers are doing this today, in which we can reclaim all of that storage for you. That's in the shipping product, and we'll continue with the Cloud Cache product.
Excellent. So we have another one from Johan. How big can the offline cache be?
To the size of your profile.
Excellent. So Matthew, in the demo, the location were located CIFS-Logix share, but in the real world, the local cache will be on the file share. So yeah, so that's basically how the profile containers work. So for the people who haven't played with FSLogix before, all the VHD or VHD access are hosted on your file server, right, Kevin?
Correct.
Good. We're going to spin forward. We have a lot of questions here. I don't know if we get time to answer all of them, but let's keep it going. So Are you caching down the entire profile VHD locally? Does that cause a long logon time, or when does this cache local? So I think if you set this, when you start setting this up, it's gonna cache everything, or how does it work?
It caches as the data is read. Do you want to take this, or I can?
Yeah. So this is important, and this exists in the existing product right now. We're not streaming anything local. That VHD remains on your network and is affected on the network. If you look at Wireshark, we don't stream down the VHD or the profile. It's not zipped up and we bring it down and unzip it or anything like that. It's actually a file that we interact with over the network. One of the reasons why it's a huge improvement over folder redirection is then what you see in a Wireshark or a process mon is just one file open, and from underneath that we read there. For the cache, if let's say in this instance you did configure the cache to be local, in the cache it would be either the writes that we were waiting to bundle up or the reads. So initially there is no impact to login because there's nothing in the cache yet on the first time you used it, and that is if you configure that cache to be on the local system.
Excellent. So I think what a lot of people here is really asking, so, okay, I'm going to implement this in my solution. I have 1,000 users. I have 40 VMs running SynApp. What happens at the moment that I enable this feature? Will it fill up my local disk, or will it use the regular profile containers, or how does it work out on a multi-user environment?
Feel free to jump in, Doug. I've been hogging all the answers.
No, I'm not concerned about you hogging answers. I just didn't want to speak over people. So I'm sorry, Eric. What was that last question?
So what happens? Will we get what we call it, a kind of boot storm when you enable this product in your 1,000 user environment? It's gonna cache everything locally and fill up the disk, and the servers just go BSOD.
Yeah, so it doesn't cache everything on boot. It caches as data is accessed. So you wouldn't end up with the entire profile coming down, if that's the question.
Exactly. So I have another question here from Bronson, and this also relates to one of the earlier questions in terms of profile container, which we didn't cover in general. For the people new to FSLogix, Microsoft RDSH has a limitation that you can only have one connection to the VHD. This is one of the things that FSLogix fixes. So the question here from Bronson is there a migration path from native RDSH profile to FSLogix?
Why, what an excellent question. What an excellent question that is. Thank you very much. We did not feed that question to him, but we do have migration facilities to move you from UPD over to an FSLogix container, and you can contact us, and one of our customer success reps will help you with that. And we also have migrations from UPM and from roaming profiles.
Excellent.
In my mind, Kevin,
smart.
I could see the smile on your face when that question came up.
Was that you, Doug? Did you do that one?
I'm kind of mad that we didn't stage that question.
Sorry, Go ahead.
You see, Bronson, really great question there. So we have Brandon asking about the link to the beta sign up. Do you have that, Gabe?
We can put that up. I don't know. Can I send a chat out to everybody? I think I can. Let me.
So while you're doing that, Gabe, I will tell you it must be easy to find. If you go to FSLogix.com, it must be easy to find, because while I've been sitting here, I've asked to get notifications on the signups, and there have been my emails filled with like 2 pages of them. So, yeah.
Excellent.
Basically, you go to FSLogix.com and it shows up right on it's the first thing that shows up in our little carousel on the homepage. I have the link here, so I will paste that into the chat once I figure out where that's at. There we go.
I think this was actually staged because the question is from Brandon.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of this is Profile Container as well, Kevin, but in terms of multiple Windows Profile versions, you know how version 2, version 3, version 5, and now we probably have a new version now with the 1803. It just came out 2 days ago. So how is that handled?
So we handle that very efficiently, and we handle it almost exactly the same way you would handle it if you are a desktop user, a physical desktop user. You will see the registry gets segregated based on versions, and then you have your documents aligned and can be used by all versions in there. So it's very efficient. And one of the things that our container technology allows for is because we're doing that all on the client side, we don't have to have a database to try to keep track of that. And so you don't, as the administrator of this, have to be worried about that. And that can get to be quite a headache. It's job security for some people, but you know what we think is your time's better spent elsewhere.
Excellent, Kevin. I think that sums up this webinar. There is way too many questions. What I promise you straight off that we close down the webinar now, I'm going to send all the question over to FSLogix and team, and then they will follow up with you. So they get your email, they get your question, and everything. So you will get your question answered for sure.
Yeah, sign up for the preview beta, everybody. If we didn't get to you, sign up for the preview beta. We'll answer your questions there.
Excellent. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you everyone that's still around. There's a lot of people still around here, Kevin and team. Thank you FSLogix for your support for SenaBlog, and also for choosing SenaBlog for the place for doing the product launch. Really exciting stuff here. Thank you everyone.
Yeah,
Any final thoughts from FSLogix?
We're just really excited about this, and we hope that you are too. And so please get your hands on the tech preview, and reach out to us. We're pretty easy to get in touch with if you have any questions. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you at Synergy.
Exactly, and that's one of the reasons why I'm going to close the webinar now, because I want this better code and make it ready for my demos at Synergy. So if you are at Synergy, make sure to visit the FSLogix booth. I'm going to be there together with Dave Breath and Esther Bartle. We're going to show a lot of cool demos. So we are going to be on the FSLogix booth at Tuesday and on the controller booth at Wednesday. And with that, thank you everyone, and bye-bye.